I'm so excited for you to listen to this episode with Erik Cabral today. His depth and vulnerability are one of my favorite things about him, and his journey to working from a place of true purpose is inspiring. In this episode, we discuss how building community can be one of your greatest assets, the transition from being enveloped in a money-focused corporate America environment into the balance he has now, and how entrepreneurship was the catalyst for doing the inner work, how that healing has bled into all aspects of his life, including parenting and relationships. This episode goes deep, and it goes deep fast. I can't wait for you to listen to it. And now, my episode with Erik Cabral.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Inspired Focus podcast. And I am so excited for you guys to meet my guest today, Erik Cabral. He is actually the person that introduced me to the world of podcasting. And when I decided to launch this podcast, I couldn't think of anyone else than him as one of the 5 people I wanted to be on my launch. And he has an incredible company called On Air Brands. He's the founder and CEO of it. They have launched dozens of podcasts, and he has the most amazing mission. It aligns so deeply with me and what we talk about on this podcast, which is they are out here to make the world a better place, one mic at a time. And one of the things I remember just loving about Erik when I met him in person in Trenton, New Jersey, right before the pandemic was how he just lit up the room and created these deep connections really quickly. And he and I share that in common. And it's something I love about people who just go deep fast. And it's what I want to do on this podcast with people. So, Erik, welcome. Thank you so much for being a part of my launch of this incredible podcast. I am so grateful to have you here.
I am so grateful for you and truly, truly honored that you chose me to be one of your early guests. So congratulations on all your success, especially on this podcast. But yeah, I'm glad we got to meet in person before everything, went a little haywire. But yeah, I'm blessed to have you in my life.
Oh, thank you. I know we've had some incredible conversations over the last few years. And I know that PodMax isn't continuing as it existed in previous history. But it was such an incredible event that brought together podcasting and community at the same time. And I think that that is one of the things I really loved about what you are doing and kind of what you bring to the world in so many ways. So one of the things I really love about what you do is that you don't just launch podcasts. You also create community around it. Can you speak a little bit to that and what it means for kind of your purpose and the mission of the business?
Yeah, 100%. And thanks again for having me on to share some of the lessons learned and definitely didn't do everything perfectly. A lot of it was not intentional. Things were kind of like just accident and building a community was not truly intentional, Jamie. Like I was a big proponent and still a big proponent of being a super connector. I love people and I love connecting the dots in my head when like every time someone speaks, I'm like, oh, there's something there. There's a missing piece. Maybe there's someone, oh, I'm thinking about this person. So I just did that at the pure heart of wanting to just give. But then I didn't realize I was building a community while I was doing all this because people were giving me credit for partnerships or raising capital or, a new business partner or client. And as I started to do this over the course of years, when I met you and we had an event, I had a community, but I wasn't calling it a community. But what I've seen it do over time was powerful, right? Because now I was making a greater impact. Like it wasn't just me and what I was doing as a company, but it was like what my friends were doing and their partners and just this huge ripple effect. So then I started to talk about it more when I realized what it truly was and how powerful it was. And when everything got 2020, when we all got 2020 and it went virtual, it was amazing. Not in all the terrible ways that we know. But that aside, because of the virtual aspect, we were able to reach more people. And that's when I truly saw the appetite and the hunger for community and like coming together and sharing ideas and like breaking off into little groups and just like crying over stuff. Like literally
Yeah.
you and I would cry in little
Yeah.
breakout rooms over the stuff that we were going through, right? I mean, because we're humans. And there's more to life than just business, right? We have family, we have friends, we have people that we do things for. And that's when I really started to understand the power of community as I realized it and experienced it in real time. And now I just shout from the mountaintops, like, you want a podcast or you want to build a personal brand? You got to start building a community if you don't already have one. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I didn't know what I was doing while I was doing it.
Well, you know what I think is really interesting actually about what you just said is there's actually another thread to pull out of it, which is at the core of it was purpose. Like we have so much more. We're human. We have our families. We have the things that we love and we care about. And one of the things, the way community was built for you was because you saw opportunities for other people and you saw ways for yourself to be of service in a really, honestly, very unselfish way. You probably got a lot out of serving other people in that way, and that created community, which really at its core is being in alignment with yourself and like really having purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to, so the audience knows and your community knows, I wasn't always this way. Like I was money driven, especially when I was in corporate America for over 20 years, and it was like money, 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 and savings, and that was my focus. And over time, I realized like I don't feel happy, I don't feel fulfilled, and I didn't know the reasons were, lack of purpose, lack of vision, lack of a mission. Like those things were foreign to me. I didn't grow up in an entrepreneurial household. But it was even during the time when I met you, it was all starting to crystallize. And when I got the word, and whatever you want to call it, divine source, God, what you mentioned earlier, your mission is to make the world better one mic at a time. I turned on social right after it came to me, and I posted it. I'm like, I was literally a meditation Erik I had a hood on, and I was like, I just finished crying, and I said the words, literally the words when they came to me. I think at the time I was saying we changed the world, and I made it more specific, like make the world better, so it's clear, because like change could be anything to anyone. But yeah, it was that, and that didn't come till years after doing business and just meeting people and wanting to love and pour into people. But it was all a work in progress and still is.
I mean, I think that's a story a lot of people know, whether they were an entrepreneur that was money driven or influenced very heavily by what everyone else has told them what's important, or came from a very corporate driven world, graduated and this is the way you climb the ladder and this is the way you advance yourself. I mean, I think that a lot of people that I talk to, and in my world, my own experience for sure aligns with that, of not always having understood what was actually my true self, my true driver, and having all of these outside reasons as my drivers. For me, I know it was about 2 years ago that I started on a journey of realizing that I had built my entire identity around being a successful businesswoman. And if I didn't have that, what was I? And we were talking about it before starting to record this, that family is one thing that I think is often a major catalyst. And I think that's especially true if you maybe wait a little bit longer than like being in your early 20s to have kids, because there is something about having that drive and doing those things, those outside influences early on, and then having kids and being like, whoa, 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 whoa. There's something more. There's something so much more. And there's a missing piece I haven't connected to inside myself. And that sounds like a little bit of what happened for you too.
Yeah, a lot of it. Definitely. There's something about children when they enter your life that gives you clarity and perspective on what's important. And when our oldest, Veronica, who's 8 years old now, the first couple of years, like she was my why, of course, and my family's my why, which gets a little cliche and easy, right? To just point to that as being your reason and your why to do what you do. But it's more to that, because what I started to notice that as she got older, I was getting older. And as I was getting older, I was realizing how much time was left. And I was thinking, man, I really want to ensure that, during the golden years of her life, I am going to be present and not on my phone or distracted with business calls and working on the weekends, because that is the one thing when you talk to anyone who is older than us, Jamie, who has grown kids. And even we'll walk around, we'll come out of a restaurant, my wife and I, and they'll see our little girls who are 8 and 5 now. They'll go, almost 100% of the older people will say, so cherish those moments. It goes so fast, and I know I'm going to be one of those people at some point. But the thing is, I am going to be intentional with every freaking day and every weekend, letting them know that I am here. I am present. My phone is not on, and I'm focused on you and only you, because I didn't grow up like that. My parents were just hustling and trying to survive and, just doing all sorts of things that were like, what is happening in my world? And it created a messed up version of me, and I want to make sure that that doesn't happen for the next generation, for our kids. And just want to understand, like, time is so short, and you take time for granted when you're like 0 to 25, because life is grand. And hey, I got another 75 years ahead of me. But now for me, I don't know if you knew this, Jamie, but I just turned 50. So I'm like, how many more years do I have? I got to make an impact, right? I had 20, 30 years. I don't know what the average like, but yeah, I gotta make a difference.
Yeah. You had your oldest at the same age that my husband was. I'm a few years younger than him. So we like very similar time frames. I really do believe there is something about that like when you were very driven in those early years and you experienced a lot, you did a lot, the impact of children is that much more massive on your psyche to be like, boom, like, do you really know who you are? And are you doing the work that you're going to be proud of, that your kids will be proud of you? Or are you
100%.
letting everyone else influence the way that you're interacting with the world, the way that you're working, the way that you're doing your relationships? And it just creates, at least for me, and it sounds like for you, it created a cosmic shift in how I operated in my business, in my family, and what became my priorities. Just figuring out what actually was in alignment and getting rid of the noise otherwise.
Yeah. And also being very aware of your actions, and that they're always watching, and your actions will dictate like decisions they make in the future and who they will become. Like I garnered and was very influenced by my mom's work ethic. She was always working super hard and burning the midnight oil, and she was always sick over it too. She'd get migraines, and like she would just be like she couldn't operate during the weekends because she was working so hard during the week. But it gave me that part of her, so her DNA to work really, really hard. But now that we're wiser as business owners, making sure I have balance, right?
Huge.
I can't do that. That's not sustainable. Clearly not sustainable for her, because she was just incapacitated during the weekends. So I want to make sure that I'm setting a good example is what I'm saying, Jamie, for my children, so that when I'm working hard, yes, they get the good like I did out of that. But then also they see that dad also poured in, like he was around and he was present, and it was the best dad. I'm going to make it really hard for whoever's going to try to marry them. I'm setting the bar really high, Jamie.
That's good. I mean,
good luck, dude.
Me and my husband are doing the same thing. And I hope their standards are high. And I hope that, as I think, I'm sure we've talked about this at some point, but the more and more I've stepped into this, the more and more I've magnetized people to me that are in the same like belief systems, the same psyche, the same, I've gotten further away from people who care about talking about the millions they're making and more about how they were able to take a month off and spend time with their kids and be there that way. That those things are more important to them because they actually know that's what's important to them. And I've just found more and more people and more community that align with that. And I want to believe that if I help my kids build these belief systems from a very early age, that they too will magnetize those same kind of people to their life.
Yeah. So good. It's almost like a cheat
I
code,
hope
right?
so.
You're like
Yeah.
attracts like, and you don't realize it when you're in party world. And, I didn't realize it, and
Yeah.
that's what you were attracting. A lot of people, that's your focus and, makes sense at the time, especially when you're single, you're looking for your mate. And, but yeah, eventually when you evolve, especially after children, man, everything changes. Like you said, I love that cosmic shift because, that cliche saying that no one on their deathbed ever says, I wish I would have
So
worked
true.
harder, but what's cool about what you and I do, the work that we do is
Mm.
impactful, right? It does make a difference. It's helping other business owners and other entrepreneurs that are making an impact. And that's what made me shift to our mission, because I realized, man, I have influence over ridiculously successful business owners who also are building communities. I'm like, wow. So it's not just me doing this. It's dozens and dozens and dozens of others like me who are making an impact. And then that's what's changing the world for the better, I hope.
It's like a
And
spider web
yeah,
effect.
it just gives us more purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. And it's what drives us every morning now, like getting up. It's not money. It's like, who can I help today?
That's the
Yeah.
biggest difference, I think. And this I think brings to a question and I'd love to talk about is the difference of waking up in the morning and actually being excited about the day versus waking up in the morning and having just even that smallest sense of dread. And I remember journaling as I was kind of entering into this phase about that's all I wanted. I wanted to wake up in the morning and just feel like, oh, I can't wait for what I have going today. I can't wait to get on this podcast recording. I can't wait to get on this coaching session. I can't wait to guide my team. Like, I'm so excited about it. And how many of us spent so many years not doing that. However, I really do believe whatever your journey was or is so much a part of whatever impact you're going to make. The experiences and the way that we appeared to and got to the place that we are today and wherever we're going has been all stacked upon each other. So the positive experiences and the negative experiences, they all end up melding together to create the journey of impact that you actually are going to have on the world. So nothing that happened before, none of those moments of dread are not worthwhile. Actually, they were there for a reason, and they have an impact going forward on the impact you're making on other people. So one of the things I'd love to kind of explore is what were kind of the hard moments of stepping into being in this amazing place today in the journey and the bigger and bigger impact you're creating every day and every year. What were the hard moments of like making that transition away from being corporate money driven, working all the time into this life you have now?
So many places I can go with that, Jamie. Honestly, I'll try to stay focused. I'll be inspired to stay focused. The transition was tough, I would say, because number one, I had to surround myself with people that I thought were good influence, and were doing what I wanted to do. Specifically, this was in real estate investing. I didn't know any investors, so I had to find people that I could eventually know, like, and trust, and shadow and learn from them and provide as much value in their life so that they would keep me in their world. So I started to do that more, but then it wasn't just that, right? It was also like working on myself. James Clear says it best. I highly recommend reading Atomic Habits if you haven't read that book. But he says that if entrepreneurship is personal development and growth in disguise. And if I had known that, I probably wouldn't have left
So
corporate
true.
America, because like you have to put an insane amount of work and create a high level of self-awareness to gain traction, to grow and to evolve and be a good and healthy business owner and create balance. And there's just so many facets to continuing on this path without driving yourself crazy and the people around you crazy. So it's like that balance is what I strive for every single day. And one of the things that I had to ensure that I incorporated was, a daily practice. What do I do every morning? I get up at 5:30 and, I do meditation and yoga and prayer and then focus on myself and what are my goals, and I journal and I do all these things that I didn't do before. And I didn't do it all overnight, like little by little by little. I had to incorporate one piece at a time to where I've gotten to the point where I do it on a regular basis. Now I'm human. I miss days here and there. And I noticed the difference, Jamie. Like if I don't, I'm like, I feel like crap if I don't do it. But one thing also I wanted to highlight is, and I'm still going through this, like even till this week and past weeks, we're going through challenges. I mentioned to you, we 10x'd our business, which is a blessing and a curse over the course of a year. So that comes with a whole host of new problems that I'd never been here before. I'm like, what is happening? So I got to find out, and it causes stress. But the thing is, the stress before would take me out, right, for a week. Like, and now, and my mental energy and all that stuff would get drained. Now it's like, how quick do we recover? Because of all the things we put in place. So now I can recover within a day or 2 days, and I won't be an a-hole to my team or to my wife, because I've put the work in over time, and it's compounded to this version of me that my wife now calls 3.0. 1.0 was me in corporate. 2.0 was me leaving and becoming an entrepreneur. Now 3.0, where I'm spiritually and wanting to be enlightened and, help the world. So yeah, it's all work in progress. I'm curious, where am I going to be in the next 5 years when we talk? I'll be a totally different person, but yeah, it's all work in progress. And
I mean, everything you just described is so much of my similar journey too. And so many of the people I know, entrepreneurship is I think it might be the biggest revealer of shadows that you could ever experience. And
it's
how
tough.
you choose to handle that is going to be the biggest difference in your life. Now, don't get me wrong. There are thousands of people out there who are very successful monetarily with like material possessions and otherwise in entrepreneurship that don't actually face these things. But the humans that, to me, the humans that are entrepreneurs that are making the biggest impact are the ones who allowed those shadows to be revealed, that stepped into the deep work around it, and really know it's a never-ending journey. Just like you said, like it's never ending.
Mhm.
Every single step along the way reveals something else. And the beautiful thing is every single time you go through it, you're adding another tool to your toolbox so that the stress you experience doesn't send you down this. I mean, I can remember some significant moments when I was early in my journey with my agency where something would take me down so hard. Like I would be on my kitchen floor, crying my eyes out, like barely able to get up. And for days, I would be like almost incapacitated with how to deal with it. And I was like, this cannot continue. And so, of course, at the time, it was, I'm not going to be, my business isn't going to run. So I get help, but really because I got help from the right places, we weren't working on business operations, really. We weren't working on who was my next hire. We were working on my mental strength, my spiritual connection, my dealing with traumas that were coming up and being triggered with all of this stuff. That's really what happens. And you're not the first person. It's been my experience, but to express that is the hard work, but it's also like the most beautiful work that happens as an entrepreneur.
It's good to be business owners that understand the journey and the work in progress and the benefits of self-awareness, because then we attract those people into our lives and we eventually make them business partners or people on the
Yes.
team. And I foster this. I'm constantly trying to nurture this within my team and you've been through the communities that we put people together that have this level of vulnerability that allows everyone else and gives permission to everyone else to be vulnerable. That's how we truly create deep connections and actually give a crap about people, because the history, where they're going. Like you and I are connected because we know each other's stories and we weren't afraid to share them. So I think the people that we're talking about and we're kind of alluding to, the ones that don't put the work in and don't put a level of vulnerability out there, they can only reach a certain level. And like you said, they can stack the chips in the monetary fashion, but where's the spiritual growth? Where's the mental health and emotional wellness? Where's all of that stuff? Where's the family? I know so many millionaires, multimillionaires that are crappy fathers, crappy husbands. And, I feel bad about that, because I'm like, man, if you just put the work in, it doesn't just wake up a little early, do some meditation, do some yoga. That'll change your world.
It's so true.
Truly.
It's so true. I love that. I mean, I think that is such a huge nugget for people that people hear over and over, but I think you need to hear it over and over. And,
yes,
there's just a moment that happens. Wayne Dyer talks about this, that there's like a moment that changes. And sometimes it, sometimes you can like pinpoint that moment. And sometimes you just kind of wake up one day and you're like, this is different. Life is just different. I've just done something different. One of the things for my morning practice that made a huge difference for me was releasing the shame around not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So on the mornings that I might have missed it, I immediately, if I started to see my mind going to a place of like, of course you can't follow through, or whatever those little stories, the little gremlin stories that like to come through are, I would work, and it took longer at first, but over time it got better and quicker to find a story that was in deep gratitude. I am so grateful I got to sleep in and cuddle with my husband. I'm so grateful I got to really enjoy my cup of coffee this morning. I'm so grateful that my son woke up at 6 a.m. and we had an extra hour together. Whatever the thing is, rather than the gremlins that are keeping me down, keeping me like in my comfort zone, really turning the story around and not allowing the shame to take over of not following through. That was a huge turning point in actually staying committed to like a daily morning routine. Did you have something like that allowed you to actually start being in that? Because I know like every book we read says, any book by an entrepreneur that we really want to follow is like, I wake up at 5 a.m. and I journal and I meditate and I do all the things.
Yeah.
But what gets you there? Like, what got you there?
It was watching it play out for others. Like you said, it had to get beaten over my head with like a sledgehammer, hearing it over and over and over from 100 or maybe 1,000 entrepreneurs and successful business owners. But it's overwhelming when it's so much, right? Especially when you look at Hal Elrod's Savers, which is basically what I do, but it's all mixed and matched. But and I made it, custom to what I need. So it's intimidating when you think about it. Those are all new habits for some people, and just knowing that if you incorporate whichever one works for you a little bit at a time at your own pace. And I also want to touch on what you said, which is it's attributed to all sorts of life, and not just waking up early and not hitting the snooze button, or things like that. We're going to do that once in a while. We're human, but giving yourself grace and understanding that you, in order to love others, have to first love yourself, so that you can, basically wear the oxygen mask and then you'll be the best. And I hate this term so much, Jamie, the best version of yourself, but it's so freaking
cliche,
true,
but
right?
it's true.
Because how are you going to do that? It's just, when I hear others or hear myself saying like, but it's like, it's so true. Like, how can you help other people if you're a hot mess or you're not playing at your best, right? So people will feed off of you and your energy. And if you're happy and you're healthy, at least for the most part, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, and then if you could string them 7, that's great. That's a huge win. But these are things where I always tell my wife this too. We homeschool and she beats herself up over it all the time. And I'm like, honey, you are doing such an amazing job. And you have to give yourself grace. You have to give yourself permission to love yourself, because then how are you going to do that for the kids? How are you going to love and pour into them if you're constantly thinking about, oh, I screwed this up. I didn't do this my best. We're human. It's understandable. But consistency will create all of that. And gratitude is a huge piece of it. Like you said, huge piece of it. If you have gratitude each and every day and every moment, man, that changes the lens for which you look life through. It's massive. It's massive because then now you're just like, I appreciate this minute, this second. That's what the whole meditation thing brings. Just your breath. You have gratitude for that. Amazing. We take that for granted. You're breathing every second of the day.
The impact of that is like so hard to see in the moment, but it's so massive over time and as it compounds. I was thinking about this the other day, and I really believe that, at least in the first world, I want to clarify that, but in highly developed countries, there would be significantly less suffering if people just fully accepted their humanness. Like, pain is inevitable. There's nothing we can do really to avoid some form of pain happening. There's gonna be relationships that don't turn out to the way that we thought. There's gonna be business deals that fall apart. There's going to be literal physical pain. You're gonna break your leg. Like, pain is inevitable, but the suffering around it, to me, so often is caused around picking away at what went wrong and what was wrong with us, the shame we build around all of it, that if we could accept our humanness in all of these situations, if your wife could accept how beautifully human she is and how amazing she's doing in her humanness for your kids, that the suffering part that is being created around, like, I'm not doing enough, would start to dissipate.
You reminded me of a really wonderful quote that's changed my life recently. Is the two main reasons that humans suffer is attachment and desire, and that comes from
very
Buddha.
Zen.
And I was like, I had to really, really like focus in on that whenever I go through things, because quick story is that I had some partnerships fail, and I suffered throughout that process. Why? Because I was attached to whatever outcome that I thought was going to occur from that partnership, from that relationship, or I was attached to the version of myself with that partner. This could go with like even a husband or a spouse or a girlfriend or boyfriend, in that like you're attached to this story and you begin to suffer because you're not letting go of that attachment, of that story in your mind, all that stuff that you played out. Once you redefine stories in your head, then you can move on and you can have peace and quickly heal. And then the desire piece of it is like, we desire an outcome, or we desire that car, or we desire that house. And you suffer as you get to that point because you don't have it, right? And then we can get into the whole manifestation thing, but it's like those two things cause all human suffering, attachment and desire. That's a game changer, and changed my life when I realized what that was.
One of the things about the attachment piece that I think about a lot led to kind of my thought about accepting humanness is I wonder, like in the situation you said with the business partner, what is it that we're making it mean about us that failed? What is it that
Yeah.
that means that we have to stay attached to the outcome that we put on there that is then making us stay in suffering? Because if there's, what I've experienced is that when I allow myself, like, or I have this belief system that if I allow myself to let it go, then I'm making that mean about me that I failed at picking the right person, that I failed at
Mm-hmm.
being able to make it work. And we have to walk through that in order to then be like, realize it actually doesn't mean that. It's the same. I mean, psychologically, it's the same thing that abuse victims go through, or people who their kids experience some kind of abuse and they like, you hear these stories of like, they won't face it or they won't listen to it. It's often because they're creating these stories around what it means about them. And they're staying attached to a type of life that they believed they were going to have, because if they don't hold on to that, then it means this awful thing about them, which isn't true, but it's the stories that we're creating and the stories that we built around all of these things in our life. And so that's where I come back to, like, if we can just accept that we're fully human and we don't always do it right, that allows us to let go of the attachment, because we're meaning creating beings, right? So we're going to have attachment. Like, we're not going to be attached to our like our parents, our kids, our husbands, our businesses. Like, we are meaning creating beings, but what is the meaning that we're creating around these things, around the attachments that we're having, that is keeping us in suffering?
Yeah. It's this is a really deep. Did you warn me we're going to be super deep? I think you did. You're like, we're going to go deep, bro. Yeah, I think you did.
I just like really
Because it's
planted the
so
seed
true.
there.
I mean, there's a million ways we
know.
can go with it, but and I'd love to give specifics, because I'm all transparent, but I
Yeah.
don't want to hurt anyone who may hear this or ripple effects of that. But I mean, don't we truly need to tell ourselves a version of a story in order to heal, whether it's right or wrong, but it's true to you? Because we have to move on, or else we'll stay, shackled to that belief or that suffering, whether it's, personal or business, because we're all human. We're gonna be attached to outcomes, and when the end credits roll, our version of the story. But life is unpredictable.
Totally.
We have no idea. So being able to, I think the key piece that we haven't touched yet is taking ownership and accountability over your role. Like, okay, maybe something didn't work. That's okay. You can tell yourself a version where that person was evil, but you played a role in that. And so, for this instance that I was telling you, it didn't work with a business partner, is that I played the role of saying yes to everything and being a people pleaser and not having boundaries. Like, I had no boundaries whatsoever. And I allowed that to happen. I allowed the expectation. I didn't manage the expectation of this individual so that they wouldn't take advantage of me, right? Because of my good nature, my heart, or whatever it is. It was my fault that I let that happen. And I wasn't a version of myself that said, no, that's not that's not in the sandbox of which, our relationship, everything was fair game. And I've learned through that process. I've figured out who I need to be in order for this to not happen again, or at least not happen in the way it did, because things won't always work out, swimmingly. But yeah, it's just having so much self-awareness so that you can quickly get to that idea, that story, that solution and result, and have peace. Have peace and still love. Like, whoever this person is I'm talking about is, I still love them very much. But hey, I allowed this to happen to a degree. I played my role and I take full ownership over that.
That is such a hugely important piece. And I think that's also part of, like, accepting the humanness. If we accept our role, right? If we accept where we did falter and don't make it mean we're a terrible person or not able to handle our stuff or whatever the thing is, we change the meaning story and fully accept our part, it becomes so much easier. We actually just went through this with a contractor who we loved as a person working on our house. And we just weren't putting the boundaries up around like the invoices and the things. And we just bled and bled and bled. And, you know, we got a final invoice and we finally put our foot down. And it took me 2 weeks to really come around to, because of course the first instinct was wanting to like, how can you take so much advantage of us? Like, da, 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 da. Here's the outline of all the things that you've done. Thank God I had the wherewithal and I've done the deep work to sit on that and not send that email and be able to come around to, here's the outline of the boundaries we have on this final invoice. We take full responsibility for not having said no earlier. And that was it. That's all I did. Do you know how much was like pressure was released after that versus I know if I had sent the email that outlined all of the ways that we felt wronged, I would have felt terrible afterwards. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other words that I wanted to use just there of like what I really would have felt. Like it would have felt so bad, but that's how I operated for so long. And it's all in that fully every aspect of your life, taking that responsibility, your wife, your business partner, when things falling apart with your kids. I mean, being able to go back to your kids because we make mistakes, like we're not perfect. I mean, a lot of my coaching clients are parents and we have to really work on not having that deep shame. There's a balance of not having deep shame around making mistakes, around yelling at our kids when we're stressed out that they didn't deserve, and taking responsibility for it not being an okay behavior and going back to them and saying, I shouldn't have done that. You know, taking ownership, teaching them to take ownership. Back to the kids thing.
Absolutely. So the kids thing and our parents and their parents and our business partners and our clients, it's like you can apologize, but can you give the reasons why that occurred? You know, like having that amount of self-awareness to be able to explain to someone. Because I used to be that type of guy where I would, have an argument with my wife or girlfriend at the, she was my girlfriend or fiance at the time. And I would apologize so that it would go away. I thought that was that's how it worked. It was the magic word that let all arguments go away. Taught. And there was this one time yes, exactly. That's how I saw it play out in my household growing up and all my other relationships prior to my wife. That made it all go away very quickly. And there was this one instance, I can't remember what, I'm sure I buried it deep. But she stayed mad at me for a long time, I'm talking months. Like we still talked and then did our things. But she was always bring it up like every once in a while, at night, especially when I wanted to go to sleep. And I'll go, I'm sorry, honey. I'm just sorry. And she'd be like, but why are you sorry? Why are you sorry? And I couldn't process why I was in the wrong. I just knew I was wrong. I didn't know why. And I couldn't express it in words because I'd never put the work in. I never could. It's not easy for everyone. So you have to do it a little bit of time, get the books, get the people, a counselor or whatever it is. So that, like you said, you mentioned shadow, there's shadow work. Like there's things that you have that are deeply recessed in your DNA and your experience in life that triggers you that maybe didn't really have a whole lot to do with you. It was something that your mother or your father did. Totally. And you learned from that. And now it triggers you and you brought it into the next relationship. And like, you have to do that deep work. Like, so I'll give you a perfect example is I didn't understand that I had abandonment issues. Like literally, this is something I recently discovered because I've been putting the work in, and it was attracting certain people around me, and I was acting a certain way so that please don't leave me, like a neediness, a high level of neediness, because I was worried about being abandoned because of things that occurred in my life and my parents, and them not talking to each other, and then not going through strife and struggles, and then not paying attention to me, a child. And not getting the attention, love, and affection that I needed as a child. And now, boom, Erik has deep rooted issues with abandonment. And I carried that into my adulthood, and I attracted people around me that would give me love. And when they didn't give it to me, Jamie, I would feel
Yeah.
abandoned. I'd be like, what's wrong with me? What did I do? What did I do? What did I do? When it wasn't me all along. And it was my deep rooted issues that stemmed from me being, not loved enough when I was a child. So it's crazy. Like if you put this
Ugh.
work in, how much it will affect your life, your family, your business. It's hard. It hurts. But it's
so worth
worth
it.
it.
And
Absolutely.
the little nuggets that come out from it, and it does affect, it affects every single part. I mean, I'll tell a really quick story of like a moment I'm actually really proud of, but my husband and I had gotten into a fight. He had said, "You go to this event that I'd really wanted to go to." And I do a lot. I mean, Erik, like I travel a lot. I do a lot for my business. I do a lot of traveling for my own deep work. Like I'm very committed to those things. I know that it makes me a better person in my family, but there is, especially I think as a mom, but I think all parents probably who have to travel deal with this. There is that piece of what am I potentially losing or doing because I'm choosing this. I'm choosing myself in these situations. So there was this underlying piece, and there were two parts. There was abandonment issues, and there was also this fear that I was being selfish. So I go to this event. I come home. He had taken care of bedtime and all that stuff, and he'd watched the final episode of a show we watched together. And I was so mad. I mean, like unreasonably mad for like what the situation was. And I was clearly so triggered. I didn't realize it in the moment, but luckily we like I think maybe early in relationships it's a good rule of thumb, but I think later in relationships being able to go to bed even if you're still mad can be a good thing because you might wake up with some clarity in the morning. And for me, what I did was I went
Yeah.
to bed, I journaled a lot. I actually let myself very deeply cry, like cathartically cry. And in my journaling, because thinking cerebrally is not going to get you anywhere, there's something so magical about the connection between your mind and your body and the things that are happening when you journal. And I journaled, and what it came down to was that fear, the fear of abandonment, the fear that I was going to lose everything that was important to me because I was being selfish. And his choice to watch that show meant our little rituals were going away. And if we lose our little rituals, we'll lose the things that are so important, and I will lose everything that's important to me. And of course, I woke up in the morning and I really wanted to be like, I don't want to see your face, go mountain biking, whatever. But instead, I did the hard thing and I sat down next to him and I said, this is what was triggered in me. This is what happened last night and why I went into a place of deep anger because I was so afraid. I was so triggered and so afraid that this represented a cascade of things that would mean I don't have what's most important to me anymore. And being able to sit down with him calmly and say that, he was like, because, one of the things that made the fight bigger was, of course, him being like, you're being unreasonable and crazy right now. What is going on? Which then made me be like, like I'm so much more mad now. And so he could then come back to me and say, wow, you were deeply hurt and you were deeply triggered. And now I understand. And you weren't being unreasonable for what was actually the thing that you were upset about. And it creates this amazing deep bond. But then I can actually see that thread, right, in so many other places, in my business, in other relationships, in different things. Because now I've unveiled this deep-seated fear, this deep-seated shadow that I have because I chose to like walk through the pain versus then just lean on, as most people do in our relationships, of you watch the show. Because it would be so easy to say that that's what I was mad about, but it's not really what I was mad about.
Yeah.
So, anyways, doing the work really, I mean, it's crazy what an incredible effect it can have on every single part of your life. Such a beautiful way.
Yeah. It's everything. It's really, life is not easy. So we have to set up things in our life, to make it manageable. And for me, it's always about like how do I get to heal quicker? Like basically I'm a geek, so like Wolverine comes to mind, where he had the power to heal. Like you cut him or you could do anything, and whoosh, his skin would seal up. And I'm like, how do I get to that process faster? It's putting, like you said, like we're talking about, putting the work in, and knowing that first it's going to benefit you, number one, and number two, it's going to have a ripple effect and benefit everyone around you, because now you can approach things with compassion and empathy and understanding where they're coming from. Because if you have a high level of awareness, self-awareness, then you can kind of, it's like zeros and ones in the matrix. You could sort of see what's happening in other people's lives and they don't even realize it. They're being triggered by things. I'm like, yeah, it's because, oh yeah, because your father, or and like we have to be conscious of like not putting out the answers, because then we sound like know-it-alls, but it's like, why things are happening and others don't, because of the work you've been putting into yourself. So it's pretty wild.
And I want to bring this back around to what you're doing in serving people in the world now, in how incredible that is to have that kind of self-awareness and helping people build and launch something that is their heart and soul. Like, to be able to support them with that level of self-awareness when they're creating. I mean, when you're creating, to have somebody by your side that can understand the depths of what it takes to create and what that can bring up, and be a support system to help them grow that in a way that feels very supported, is truly amazing.
Yeah. You like-minded, right? You like attracts like, and you want to work with people who you feel safe and comfortable and know, because then you'll have the proper guidance, right? And that you'll have more than what you're paying for, so to speak, because you're going to have a high level of support beyond just the work, right? For me, it's like less the tactical and the strategic, but it goes deeper than that, right? Like, how do you make an impact? Well, you have to speak to the heart, and you have to understand what's in others' hearts, right? Because everyone has different goals. But I'm going to sound cheesy for a second, but it all really boils down to love, truly. That is my mission in life, is to really help people recognize that they have that within themselves, and to love themselves first before you can like really do truly magic in the world. And a lot of people don't love themselves. It's bizarre. Like they just don't. And we're not taught that in school. They don't necessarily teach that in church. It's more about, loving a God, but like we have to truly love ourselves in order to help people and put the oxygen mask on, so that we can, help other people with what they're trying to do. So that's really what I align with, is why are you doing this? Is there purpose behind it? Are you truly trying to get fulfillment out of it, or do you want money out of it? I mean, and that's okay. But yeah, we're here for support on all sorts of levels and facets.
That's so amazing and so beautiful. And I love that one of the most important things to you is that the people you work with are truly from a deeply authentic place, wanting to make an impact in the world. And we align on that in so many levels. That is how I am with our agency clients. That is how I am with my coaching clients. And I love you so much for that. And we could honestly probably talk for an entire day. So, you're going to have to just become...
I'm going to cancel all meetings today.
You're just going to have to become a regular on this show, because we clearly go so deep so fast, and there's so many areas that we could talk about. And I don't want to take up the rest of your day, because I did not block it out on your calendar. So,
We're going to have part two,
Yeah.
though, Jamie, because I'm going to have you on my show.
I
And we'll
love
continue
that.
this conversation.
We need to do that. Perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what is the podcast that we're going to have part 2 on?
Oh, Entrepreneur
Perfect.
Circle.
Okay.
So,
And I
yeah,
have been on your show before, on that show before. I know you're just like dabbling in so many things. So I'm like, where are we going to go? So perfect. I love Entrepreneur
Yeah.
Circle. So everyone who is listening, 1, check it out now. And 2, we will be following up with part 2. And I'm so excited about that because honestly, like, I just think that there's so much depth that we could go into. Clearly, if you are looking for somebody to support you in your podcast, get a podcast launch. Erik, and you're a deeply heart-centered human being, entrepreneur, creator, whatever that is creating this amazing vehicle to put your message out into the world. Erik is someone you probably should be working with. And he has a pretty cool guide that you can check out. That is at erikcabral.com/guide. We'll make sure those are in the show notes. Is there anything, what did they get in that, Erik?
Yeah, .co. I wish I had the .com. It's okay. I'm gonna have to send somebody, like, put a pillow over him and like bring him out to like Tanzania or something. Like, hey, go away, dude. You have my name and you have my URL, but here's yeah. But anyway, I went to a dark place there because it was too much light. But
yes,
it's true that erikcabral.co/guide is the perfect place for anyone who wants to start a podcast or has a podcast. And it's all the stuff I've collected over the years, robust for a downloadable free PDF for you. And yeah, just go check that out. And there's actually an opportunity there. You see my calendar. If you feel inspired to have a conversation and continue, this thought and potentially need some help, you can actually book some time with me there as well.
I love that. So amazing. So grateful to have you on and to reconnect after a little bit of time and go so deep, so fast, so amazing. And I can't wait for part 2. Thank you, everyone who's listening. And we will be back soon with another episode. I am Jamie O'Connor, and you are listening to the Inspired Focus podcast. If you haven't already, head over to Instagram and give us a follow at Inspired Focus Podcast. You can also subscribe to your favorite platform by checking us out at inspiredfocuspodcast.com. If you're interested in learning more about how you can work with me or getting information about the next retreat, which is Flourish Baja, you can get that information at inspiredfocus.co. We will be living it up in Mexico from May 21st to May 26th, and I would love for you to join me. Check that out at inspiredfocus.co. See you soon.